Well, good evening to you, Grenada, Carrick, Repeating Martinique, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, wherever you are. It is Wednesday. It is, in fact, the 8th day of the month of June, and indeed it's a pleasure being here with you as you get ready for yet another edition of Election Watch. We literally in countdown mode, and when I say so, I mean it literally. The countdown, the march towards the 8th, the 23rd of June, Election Day. This evening, we will take, as we've been doing over the last couple of weeks, this evening we want to focus on the do's and don'ts of election days, the rules that governs how we behave, how we should behave, how we may think of behaving, not just us, but the political parties. What are the parameters that's involved? Can they do and say what they want? We, the citizenry, we have rules that we must abide by. So too does the RGPF. We'll be having that conversation this evening right here on Election Watch. Thanks for joining us. Those of you that's on across the different platforms. Classic Radio, we say thank you for joining. GBN Television, Channel 7, Channel 11, and Channel 20. And we say a special thank you for those of you that's joining us via the different social media platforms, be it Facebook or YouTube, or via the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd. My guests, starting with those joining us remotely, starting with the representative from the RGPF, ASP Douglas. ASP, good evening to you, and thanks for being part of this evening's conversation. Also joining me remotely to share their concerns as it relates to the political climate that is currently on in Grenada is the leader of the most recent political party to join the political arena, Andrea Rapier of Power. Lady Rapier, we say thanks for being part of this evening's conversation. And with me in studio, it always feels good to have your wingman next to you. He's with me in studio, Dave Ned, and he's representing the Independent Caucus of Constitutional Reform. Gentlemen, lady, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure being here, and thanks for giving us the opportunity that we can speak to the general public this evening.
Indeed, it's always a pleasure for us doing that. Let us first set a tone for where this conversation is to go. In our electoral system, elections every 5 years, constitutionally due every 5 years, and very often it's an exercise that we often say it is one that each and every one of us should appreciate in the context of us being in a democratic state, where we get the opportunity every 5 years to elect and decide who among us is deemed worthy of governance of this piece of rock that's called Grenada. But to put that in the context for me, Dave, we all would agree that this exercise is one that of elections, our rights to vote. It is one, and it's a right that is enshrined within that which is the most supreme law that governs each and every one of us, the Constitution. Everything that we do is tailored by the Constitution. So setting in context for me, what sort of provisions is made for us as Grenadians under the Constitution when it comes to our rights to elect?
Okay. A very specific question, Joe. And the answer to that would be that the Grenada Constitution, in fact, throws a curved ball at every Grenadian citizen. Now, the right enshrined in the Grenada Constitution is given to a Commonwealth citizen. And Grenada, as part of the Commonwealth, you now have a right to vote. And Section 32 of the Constitution provides that every Commonwealth citizen who has attained the prescribed age and who possess the qualifications that Parliament may prescribe can vote in the elections. So, you're a Commonwealth citizen, you must have the prescribed age, and then there are qualifications that you must have.
What are some of those qualifications?
The qualifications has mainly to do with residency and domicile. We have a representative democracy, and the whole rationale for our elections is that we are to vote into office people that would represent our constituencies. And there's some very specific laws that have been passed in that regard that would guide that process. And I guess as we go into the evening, we're going to go a little bit more into them. But the basis of our democracy is that we have a representative democracy. And the key is that we must have representation. So the people that we vote for must reflect who we are as a constituency, because it is the individual constituencies that are in fact electing their representatives.
Thank you, Dave. So, Andrea, with that being said, as we've established a pretext for this evening's conversation, you would agree with me that our rights to elect leaders and not have individuals who would dictate to us that which should be done, or what we should say, or how we should behave, isn't something that we should take lightly, should it? Should we?
Down because government has made it such, but Joseph, we hire government to represent us. We hire government to consolidate our ideas, our ideals, our values, our interests, both socially and economically, our national security. We hire government to assemble all of these for 110,000 of us in Grenada, that when the government steps into office that we elect, it's a job that they're hired to do, that we should expect excellence, that we should expect delivery of the benefits that we place them there for. And it's important for us as citizens, as voters, to hold them accountable to that job. And the job has now become a superior position where they now lord over us. But I have never seen a business owner hire an employee and then hand the reins over and become subject to them. And that has happened. And we don't handle, as human beings, we don't handle absolute power well. We don't handle it well in our egos. And so we find that with our constitution that allows for an elected government to be re-elected more than 2 terms, it sort of opens the door for the situation we have in Grenada now, where over time government can usurp an unhealthy authority over its citizens. And this is what we have in Grenada, unfortunately.
Quite interested. You're out of the gates, and you out of the gates, and you gates at full speed. Now, ASP, the Royal Grenada Police Force, I know you would agree with me, has a fundamental responsibility for the preservation and the maintenance of law and order throughout the Tri-Island state. And that responsibility comes even into greater focus when it comes to the exercise of election. Certainly these laws, according to the Representation of the People's Act, the Public Meeting Prohibition and Control Act, together with the Public Order Act, all of those gives the IGPF quite a reign of authority and responsibility as to how we should behave, what we can and cannot do, and that which, if you ask, is one of the most important exercise that we conduct every 5 years. And I'm assuming that the IGPF is ready to accept that responsibility yet again. What say you? Is that the case, or have I got it all wrong?
Certainly, Joe, you have it correct. The IGPF is always ready to accept and execute its responsibility in relation to preservation and maintenance of law and order in the country. So we have been ready since the last election, for this election, to ensure that we do our jobs and ensure that the process goes on smoothly with minimal amount of interruptions or no interruptions whatsoever, if possible. We have been ready and we are ready now.
I'm happy that you're forcing me onto this one, because normally I try to behave and conduct myself well. But when you said you've been ready since the last election, I'm assuming that you did your post-mortem from the last election, looking at exactly the political landscape, the highs and lows. Is that part of the exercise? Anything that you can share that the IGPF, that you've learned as we get inch closer to June the 23rd?
But It is part of the exercise. Unfortunately, I do not have the information as to exactly what the administration of the force would have observed and determined that needs to be adjusted or needs to be changed. But certainly, after the process, a postmortem is done and adjustments are made for future exercises.
Let us set a tone for election day, because let's set a tone for what is expected on election day, and let's start looking at the hours of as it relates to the taking of the polls, because it's interesting that each and every one of us, we're going to start with the 20th, because in fact the IGPF, that's when you cast your ballots. What can you tell us?
Yes.
What will be special about that day for you, the members of the IGPF?
Okay. I think it is obvious that it came about because of the significant responsibility that the IGPF has on election day to maintain law and order. And if we are required to go cast our votes on the same day, then it means there will be a void in the enforcement of the law. So the purpose behind the separate days to ensure that the police are out in full on the day that the rest of the general public go to cast their votes.
He says out in full, Andrea, and I'm start thinking, whoa, out in full to do what? I mean, is it by any way? And we understand the importance. What is it that makes what you do so different? The people are just coming. Are they coming? They just coming to cast their ballots. Is there a specific code of behavior, code of conduct? Is it a way that they're expected to behave so that would warrant the IGPF to be out in full?
Is that a question of... Okay,
No, that's an ASP. I'm going to come to you in a while, Andrea.
Yeah, just making sure.
Certainly, because with any group of people you find in any one place, you tend to have issues of, especially when there are long lines and persons have to wait for long periods, you tend to have issues of persons getting impatient, getting irritated, and some persons either stop cooperating or fail to cooperate at all on arrival at that area. So the same thing can apply. In fact, it does happen on election days that persons come and they think the line is too long or they have to wait too long in line and so forth, and they may behave in ways that they're not supposed to, or ways that we cannot afford to tolerate on election day. So that is the reason that the IGPF has to be out there. Remember, we have a significant number of polling stations, and we need to have police presence at all of them. At the same time, we also have to conduct all our normal duties, all our regular duties. So that explains why we need to be out in full, because we need to cover all our normal duties, in addition to cover all the polling stations that we have throughout the country.
What are some of the ways that people are expected to behave? If you could highlight some of that, because I get the sense, team, that the maintaining the sanctity of that day is an important element to our democracy, that nothing should happen or transpire that should in any way bring into question the process. Correct?
Correctly. One of the significant things about getting a process like this to run smoothly is having persons do so in an orderly fashion. So the law demands that the officer in charge of that polling station can direct persons to form a line and a queue, as it is said in the law. And if persons do not cooperate with that directive, then that officer has the power to take certain decisions, to give the police directives and so forth. So the police are there. Part of the purpose of the police there is to ensure that persons follow that instruction and be orderly in the way they come to that polling station to cast their votes. In addition, your conduct generally. So persons are not expected to be loud, not expected to in any way interrupt any other person from conducting their business, going to cast their votes and so forth. Persons are not allowed to try to influence any person to vote in a particular way or not to vote in a particular way, and things of that sort. So we expect persons to behave in a very orderly manner on election day in order that the process runs off smoothly.
Ned, behaving an orderly, how important is that in your estimation? ASP keeps speaking of maintaining the balance of order on the day and showing that we get the process right. But you would agree that getting the process right should not just be on the day itself, but even as a lead up to the exercise.
The process, the elections day and the election of our representatives involves many players. Primarily, it involves the citizenry, and they are expected to behaving in very much as the way that is being recommended now, that the elections should be peaceful, that you should be sober in your calculations, in your assessment of the actions that you're going to take, that you understand what it is you are about, and that the whole concept that you are in fact a custodian of this little rock, and we have to manage it and pass it on to the next generation. So as adults, as over 18 years, we are now making a decision for the next generation, and we have to be cognizant of all of those inputs. The police force is a player, and their role is to keep law and order. We have the citizenry, and by and large, the most important role in this process is left to the Parliamentary Electoral Office and the Supervisor of Elections. And it's a big role. It's one that the Constitution takes very seriously, and the Constitution actually gives the cloak of independence to that office, and in his actions, the supervisor is subject to the control. No person or authority can instruct the supervisor of elections. He has an independent office, and
has an independent, or is expected to?
It is expected to be an independent office, and the provisions are made in the Constitution, very explicit, similar to the Director of Public Prosecutions, similar to the Public Service Commission. They clothe with independence.
And that's enshrined in the Constitution. So this is not, it doesn't matter who the individual is.
It does not matter.
Once they're in that office, they should be independent, and separate and apart from any outside influences, and operate outside of any external pressure.
And the main focus is to ensure that the public, the citizenry by and large, partakes in the electoral process. So there's a registration process that he's responsible for, and the office should be carrying out educational programs involving in civic groups, meetings with the broad masses of people to educate them as to what is ongoing in the electoral process and what is expected of the citizenry. In this regard, there are a number of initiatives that they can take. And over the years, you would see various supervisors, they would call meetings, civil society, the NGOs would be invited, they would go into schools, etc., and bring the whole electoral process to the people and have them understand what it is.
You said over the years, I'm getting the sense Are you in any way suggesting that that has not been happening the way you would like it to, or you've seen a reduction of that kind of participatory engagement?
Well, since 2013, we've had probably 4 or 5 amendments to the Representation of the People's Act. And if we just pay a little bit of attention to the words representation of the peoples, it belongs to the people. It is their act. And this act has been amended a number of times. And if you ask the average citizen, nobody knows. So, that is the kind of information that should be put in the public domain, that people can discuss the amendments, that in fact the amendments should have been they should have been consulted on the amendments before they went to Parliament, that kind of initiative. And all of that lies within the ambits of the supervisor of elections.
Andrea, do you get a sense listening to Dave that there seem to be some gray areas, I would refer to it, as it relates to that which is expected to or should be done by the Parliamentary Electoral Office, as to ensure, because I'm thinking, if I'm here, this isn't as a citizen, I'm here on this, one of the most important days in our lives every 5 years, to make that vested decision as to whom we hand the reins of power to. That we should all be fully aware of, so what is it we're doing, and educating on the process. Andrea?
Well, Joseph, the Representation of the People Act is not really ambiguous, which is wonderful. When it comes to elections, it's actually clearly defined what the role of the supervisor of election is, what role the Governor General plays, what role any other bodies play. And other than the electorates ourselves, there are no other parties to play a part. Of course, there's the Boundaries Commission that has that role as well. But it's very clear what the supervisor's role is and how he's supposed to, or she is supposed to behave themselves in the decorum of that position. And that position cannot be dictated to in any form. It isn't to be dictated to. And we can argue otherwise, but education is empowering. You have to remember that. The responsibility to educate the population comes from an agenda that wants an empowered people. And we have not seen an agenda for education when it comes to our Constitution and our civil duties. We haven't seen that. So based on that, I think we can extract that there has not been an agenda to empower people. But these are the people, we the people are the ones, and as Dave so well said, it's a representation of the People's Act. It's representing us, the people, we the people. We don't know what that representative is saying, number one. We don't know when what that representative dictates is violated or honored. And we don't know what our role is in making sure that it is that it delivers, that it is honored, that it's respected. So there's a lot of ignorance in play, and the people who, I was on one other show and somebody asked about the Constitution. And there is some ambiguity in the Constitution, yes, but it leaves flexibility for government to be able to move freely within the parameters of good leadership. And when that does not happen, it is the people's responsibility to have some sort of recourse, some sort of recall. And it's really important that every 5 years when we have elections, that we educate our population so they know, how is this supposed to look? And in Grenada, what we find is that people say, oh, it's been done. When you tell people how it's supposed to look, they sort of go, oh, it's never been done that way. And so because of that ignorance, that lack of education, anything goes, and the people in the power are making up the rules. But the supervisor of election is the bodyguard. He's the guard against that. And so there are some things to be fixed. And I don't think the Representation of the People Act is gray in what his or her role is in that position. It just needs to be required and held accountable.
And I'm getting the sense that in the back of that mind of yours, you've engineered some concerns as it relates to the supervisor of election and his role. Well, we're going to get to that, but we want to have a balanced conversation. So there is a responsibility of the supervisor of election, and I guess also ASP, we want to also engage and remind the general public as to how they're supposed to behave. So if you can, ASP, let's delve into it a bit more as to code of dress, behavior, language on the day, that which is expected. Because I have a big orange jumper that I plan to wear from 5 o'clock election morning.
Okay, let me just find the appropriate sections here.
Again,
one of the things,
okay. Mm-hmm.
One of the things, while I'm trying to find the sections, persons who are allowed to be in any polling station on polling day, any person who is not there for the purpose of casting a vote is not allowed to be within the polling station. In fact, not allowed to be within 100 yards, or congregate within 100 yards of any polling station. Okay. That is one of the rules in terms of persons' behavior. So any persons wishing to have discussions among themselves, they need to do that outside of that 100 yards of the polling stations. Questions may be put to persons by the presiding officer when they present themselves as an elector. And those persons are expected to respond truthfully to those questions in order to allow the presiding officer to satisfy himself or herself of whether or not that person is eligible to vote.
So let me throw a curveball at you here. So, for instance, I vote at the daycare center on Spring Hill and Springs. Right
Yes.
next to the 2 buildings away is a shopping center. People meet, they stop, they go, they converse. It is less than the prescribed distance from which people are allowed to congregate. So if I'm inside of the supermarket and a friend meet me and we have a conversation in there about
The law does,
the business of the day.
The law does not make any exception to that rule. The rule is strict that no persons are allowed to congregate within that 100 yards unless they're there for the purpose of casting a vote.
But I am in the supermarket, which is just 50 meters away from the polling station.
I think the fortunate thing for us is that I am not aware of any polling station that is that close to a supermarket.
Actually, there is. And
Yes.
that's why I specifically ask you, and I said what it is, because I'm asking this logic. I'm asking you because, I mean, those are the things that creates issues on the day. So the Springs Daycare Center, that preschool on Spring Hill, 2 buildings away, is a shopping mart. Less than 50 meters away, there's a shopping mart right there.
So if persons are going about their business, conducting their business within those business places, I do not believe that the intention of the law is to prevent them from doing so.
Right.
But congregating otherwise is what the law intends to deal with. So persons may want to stand outside of that business place that they refer to and have discussions, and that would not be allowed. So if persons coming and going into that business place to conduct their business, I do not think the law intends to prevent them from doing so.
Quite interesting. And that's why I can reasonably see why law enforcement will be stretched on the day. And,
Yes.
I'm assuming, ASP, that is for that reason why, going back to the point that Dave and Andre is making, the need for there to be that continuous education process so that people understand the significance of the activity that's been engaged in on the day. I mean, you would agree also that must be really, really something that's not an exercise that should be taken lightly.
Of course. And that is the main reason that the administration of the force started fitting to make an effort to do so. Our effort would not be as expensive as it is needed, because we will focus more on the issues that mainly confront us. But of course, there is a need for education in a general sense of all the rules that govern the election process. I totally agree with you.
It is often said, ASP, that we live in a rum culture. We have a rum culture in Grenada. That's just said. I don't necessarily, I'm trying to figure out what is it. But the law, of course, on election day speaks to intoxicating liquor not being sold.
Yes. Yes, Section 82 of the Representation of the People Act deals with that, and it says in subsection 1 that no intoxicating liquor shall be sold, offered for sale, or given away at any premises situated in any constituency in which an election is being held, and to which a license issued under the Liquor Dealers License Act, Chapter 174, applies at any time between the opening and closing of the poll on polling day. So the law is specific on that no liquor dealer, no operator of a bar or shop or any such place that deal in liquor is allowed to sell, give, offer for sale, or any of those things on a polling day during the hours that the poll is open. And of course, it is established that the poll opens at 6 a.m. and closes at 5 p.m. So at any time between 6 a.m. and 5 p.m., passing on, I like to call it that, passing on to any other person any intoxicating liquor is an offense.
And to every offense, there is a penalty for failure to adhere.
A penalty. And the penalty for this offense in subsection 3, any person who contravenes any of the provisions of either of the last two preceding sections shall be liable on summary conviction to a fine of $500 and imprisonment for 6 months. Now it says the last two, and I read one. The second one basically deals with businesses registered under the Registration of Clubs Act. So the first subsection speaks to businesses registered under the Liquor Dealers License Act, and the second one speaks to businesses registered under the Registration of Clubs Act. So the same circumstances apply to both.
Quite interesting. I want us to delve into, because there seemed to be a lot of focus, Andrea and Dave, as to how we the people, we're expected to behave. We should be as good, modest, modern, decent people, line up, conduct our civic responsibility, and go home. But sometimes, as a build-up to the day, we see behaviors, patterns, actions from on the political arena, political parties, organizations, on their platforms, that sometimes begs the question, if the leaders behave that way, how then do they expect us, the citizenry, to behave any better when we should be taking examples from them? And I'm going to go with you, Andrew, because I know as leader of power, you've raised some concerns as it is, as to the culture and climate that exist here at home.
Indeed, it's very concerning, actually, and insulting, and disrespectful to the country and representing the nation globally, you know. But there is a hypocrisy in what's expected from the people and what's expected from government, and we have to blame both government and the people.
Hypocrisy, you
government,
say?
Yes, hypocrisy, because of course, let's just look at election day and the responsibility of the police. If anyone behaves uncomely, the police is going to step up and step to that person and bring correction, and they would make an arrest if it's needed. If you flip that around to the process of getting to the polling day and everything, all the logistics and administration and relationships that it takes to get to the polling day itself, there's a lot of things that transpire that are also uncomely, that are represented by political officials and candidates, and it's acceptable. And I'm not saying our GPF should step up and arrest anyone. But I'm simply saying that we need to come to a consciousness as citizens of what it is we're experiencing in the country. Let's be honest about it. Let's be honest about what we want our expectations of our leaders to be, and are they really representing that? Do we want obscenity, in our campaign? Do we want bribes in our campaigns? And while I'm at it, it's called treating in our Constitution. Our Constitution does not allow for you to give things away in order to coerce people to vote for you. And I'm saying everything very simplistically because I want people to understand this. But there should be a level of respect and an expectation that the people who lead us hold themselves in a place of honor, in a decorum that is worthy of representing the people of Grenada. And we are a proud people, and we want to be proud of the people that we are placing in responsibility. We want, when our representative goes into a regional meeting, that person is respected as an individual and then as a statesman on our behalf. We want, when that person goes on the global scene, that we have the same type of respect. And whatever that individual garnishes as respect, whatever the capital is, the human capital they acquire or that they lose, it's a reflection on us, the nation, as a people, and we pay for that dearly as well. We pay for that economically, we pay for that socially, we pay for that even in our own relations, in our own civil relations with each other. So we need to become conscious, and I think people are becoming conscious. People are really tired of what's happening in the campaigning and the level of disrespect that's representing the country, and is not a good representation of the populace. And there are exceptions, of course.
Let me ask you though, before you go on, Andre, because I don't want to miss anything. You made mention of giving people things, and now you're talking. When you say give things, what are you referring to? I give you what? Give things in what context?
Well, let's use a case in point here. I know someone who received some work on her house in exchange, of course, for voting. It's election season. It's Christmas.
So that happens all year long?
You know that. Everybody knows this, right? We know the roads get fixed, which should, it's almost as, you know what it's like? It's like starving your children until guest comes over, and then you lay a table before them to impress your guests, right? It's election season, it's Christmas. But having events where people are getting anything for free in exchange for a vote, that's actually illegal by our Constitution. And I used to actually, when I got into politics, I realized that we had no real heavy campaign financing room. And I thought, oh my gosh, this makes us so vulnerable. But then when you understand the Constitution and the representation of the People's Act, you realize why it became unnecessary to have any heavy representation on campaign financing. Because our laws actually expect politicians to campaign with dignity, to campaign honestly, to campaign on an agenda, and let the Grenadian people make a choice.
So let me ask you, Andrea. I want to ask you.
A T-shirt with $100
So let me ask
for
you.
example. Right?
So Ned is my friend. Ned said, Joe, I said, I'm free today. I have nothing to do. Let me come and do some work in your house. Okay, no problem. What's wrong with that? Am I trying to influence Ned in any way?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that until you use it as a hook to get Ned to vote for you.
But how do you determine that I'm using it as a tool? I'm just being a good citizen. I'm just a good guy here. You're in need, and I am helping. I'm giving you a handout.
3 years ago, when his house needed fixing, did you step up? Or did you just wait to do it during elections? And are you doing it as a representative of a political party with an authority to be able to influence that individual? And Ned can speak more clearly on how the Constitution describes that. Well, but it literally says anything. Given,
well, unless Ned, unless somebody can show me in writing, because I can't see anything wrong. When a brother coming to me and say, look, God forbid, it hasn't happened to me as yet. I'm waiting. One day when somebody walk up to me and say, yo, JC,
we can read it to you.
Here's 100 blocks, my boy. I'll tell him thank you. But Ned, is there anything in the Constitution? And then, so you want to talk about that, and then I'm going to go back to ASP as to if it's in the Constitution, then what does the law, how does law enforcement deal with it? What is?
Maybe we can ask because the ASP has the Representation of the People's Act open in front of him, and if he can refer to Section 89, it speaks to treating. And if he can give us a definition, it would help, for the public to understand how treating is defined, who can treat, and how it becomes an offense.
Okay, so let me throw it over to ASP, and then I'm going to get you to break it down for me. So ASP, the issue of treating.
Yes.
Can you, from a law enforcement perspective, say to us, what is it? Is it legal, illegal? If so, what is obtained legally?
Okay, I'll endeavor to read the section, what it says. Section 89 says, the following persons shall be deemed guilty of treating within the meaning of this act. And that is the Representation of the People Act. 1, every person who corruptly, by himself or herself, or by any other person, either before, during, or after an election, directly or indirectly, gives or provides or pays wholly or in part the expenses of giving or providing any food, drink, entertainment, or provision to or for any person for the purpose of corruptly influencing that person or any other person to vote or to refrain from voting at such election, or on account of such person or any other person having voted or refrained from voting at such election. And the subsection 2 says, every voter who corruptly accepts or takes any such food, drink, or entertainment or provision. So the person who gives or offers and the person who accepts are deemed guilty of treating under those circumstances.
And what's the penalty for treating?
Imprisonment.
That person shall be liable on summary conviction to imprisonment for 2 years or to a fine of $2,400. There's 2 years imprisonment and a fine of $2,400.
Okay, ASP. So you've established that is on the law books. That is
Yes.
on the law books. It is on the law books. Now I'm coming to you, Ned, to you, Dave. Break this down for me. I mean, I'm hearing giving, receiving. I'm hearing about entertainment. I'm hearing about food. This sounds as the kaleidoscope of events that happens every day in Grenada when it comes to elections. Party, this, that, concerts. What are you telling me? Have I been missing something all these years?
It goes back to us speaking about education again. Treating has been on our law books. It has been always a part of the Representation of the People's Act. And it speaks directly to a problem that we have identified with our electoral system over the years. Many have been asking for campaign finance legislations. But if you read this, as ASP just did, you cannot give a gift to somebody. You cannot treat somebody for the sole purpose of with the intent of them or with you trying to influence them.
But who measures intent?
Okay.
How do you measure intent? I gave ASP, I say ASP, this is what, I gave you a bag of yam. It's been a good season. What's wrong with that?
Okay. Intent is not a very simple one to ascertain. Now, if you give me a T-shirt, okay, There's nothing wrong with you giving me a T-shirt. Okay? But if the T-shirt says, vote Joe,
Right.
then what is the intent?
Vote Joe.
So
You
that is what we think. You are giving me the T-shirt, and on the T-shirt it says, vote Joe.
right.
And Joe is a candidate in the elections. And I think this is what treating is speaking to.
So ASP, is that your simple understanding of what the law depicts that treating is?
In relation to the T-shirt, I think it might just be a little stretched, just giving the T-shirt, because the T-shirt can be treated the same way as the banners and the flags and so forth. To give that person to wear that T-shirt, but maybe another form of gift might be a better example.
For example, have we had occasions though? Have we had occasions? You're an ASP. Have you had occasions where you know with persons have been under the law? Because that's what we use it as our guide, where they've been charged for the act of treating.
No, I have never heard of any example of it, any instance of anybody being charged. As indicated, matters like these are very difficult to prove. You need to have some form of evidence to satisfy a court that that was the intention of the person in order for you to succeed with the prosecution. So it's very difficult to prove those types of cases.
Difficult to prove, he says, Andrew, because I know you're on a time constraint. You have to leave us. We have a clip. We'll come back. It's difficult to prove. How do you prove that I've given you a T-shirt that's marked "Vote JC" and that I'm corruptly trying to influence you? I probably just want to get some. I'm trying to get some cloth off my hands.
Okay. So we're going to stick with the T-shirt and we're going to stick with the law. What about the $100 in the T-shirt when I threw it off the truck to you? Is that treating? Now, when the officer read the Constitution, when he just read the Representation of the People's Act, I guarantee you, every Grenadian identified, understood. If they heard it, their mind immediately went to case in point. It is not going to be difficult to make a case in court and get statements from Grenadians that said, yes, I received blah, blah, blah every election year, every election campaign. So if you take a look at not just the fact that you got the gift, but the circumstances around receiving the gift. Let's look at bringing in an artist and offering a concert at your rally, right? I know the artist is being paid hundreds of thousands. Are the people, actually the audience, are they paying for a ticket to attend that? Or is it free as part of political campaigning? What about promising them a party for 4 days after election? You can't say that's not treating, Joseph. I am telling you that if you vote and I win, you're going to have a party. The Constitution, the Representation of the People's Act that the officer just read addresses before, after, and promise of. And earlier, it goes to what I said about the disrespect and the insult. It is a blatant disrespect and an insult, and it's because we are not educated. But we are educating our people now. We do know. We're starting to learn, and it is our responsibility in learning the truth to stand for it and to defend the Constitution, which is what Power is doing, which is what the Independent Caucus for Constitution Reform has been doing for years. This is what GEM is doing. This is what the Renaissance Party is doing. We're deciding on behalf of the Grenadian people, we are going to partake in the representation of the Grenadian people, just like the Act does, to defend that Act so that that Act can defend us. It's really important that we have free and fair elections, and the rules are in a way set to level the playing field.
Do you get the sense, though, Andrea, I'm going to ask you, and then we'll take a break because I know I have to excuse you, and then we're going to open the lines in a bit, and when I get back. But are you saying to me that our leaders have taken an oath, to serve, to protect, to hold fast to the Constitution, that they will deliberately transgress that Constitution that sacred holy grail of who we are as a people? I can't see that. Maybe I'm in a different dimension.
Yes, it's a deliberate transgression and violation of a covenant. As leaders, when we take the position to serve our country, when we apply for the job, and that's what campaigning is, and when we're hired, that's what election does. We have a covenant, a contract with the people to serve for 5 years representing the people of Grenada. And that representation must be taken with a level of seriousness, responsibility, accountability, and integrity. Now, those are qualities that one must have as an individual first before one can give it to anyone else. So we have to be a little bit more conscious in our selection of who we're hiring when we look at our candidates, who we're hiring, and hiring them based on the fact that they must represent us and function within the representation of the People's Act, within the walls and the constraints of our Constitution. Otherwise, it is lawless leadership. Anything that violates the law is lawless. And when it is without consequence, it is we, the people, who pay the worst cost for that, the worst consequence for that. So it is time for us now to look at, and we're in election season, we're in hiring season now, Grenadians. All of us must now look at our candidates. We need to look at their resume. We need to look at their integrity, their accountability, and their honor. Do they honor their families? Do they honor their words to their neighbors across the street? Are they honorable in their business affairs? Do they love people? And will they die for you? Will they throw themselves in front of a car for you? Because that's the kind of leader you're going to want. That's what you want to give the job to. People that will live within the constraints of the covenant that we're going to make with them, the contract that they're going to sign when they take the job to lead the country and represent us.
Andre, you've thrown a lot of us, but I know you have to leave, so I'm going to excuse you because you have some other matters to attend to. We do always appreciate your insight on this. We'll take a commercial break, though. When we come back, ASP, when we come back, Dave Ned, we have a video that we have to look at. A judgment handed down by the CCJ that speaks to the same issue of treating. We'll look at that when we come back. We'll take a quick commercial break right here on Election Watch.
With your new GUT Credit Union Visa debit card, which gives you access to your cash at any Connex or Visa certified ATMs locally and internationally. Make your payments with a tap of your card using the contactless feature and have the freedom to make purchases locally, online, or overseas whenever you travel, anywhere Visa is accepted. Experience the enhanced security fraud protection through the Visa chip technology. If you don't have your new GUT Credit Union Visa International debit card, speak to any one of our representatives today to do more. Your new GUT Credit Union Visa International Debit Card. A smarter way to access your cash. More smart, more secure.
Distributed by Calico Trading, Frequency St. George's, telephone number 439-9239.
When a loved one passes on, we all need the comfort, support, and guidance of a trusted friend. You can rely on LaCour Brothers Funeral Home. We provide a personalized professional service that exceeds all expectations. Our dedicated staff responds to your every need with the greatest detail, ensuring affordability with a variety of options. Our upgraded state-of-the-art facilities, spacious air-conditioned chapel with live internet streaming, a modern, environmentally safe crematorium, the only of its kind on island, private viewing spaces, large on-site repast center, a modern transportation fleet. Join our burial society today and make personalized arrangements for that final moment. As you prepare to enter your loved one into eternal rest, visit or call LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and select a package that brings added comfort to the entire family. LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and Burial Society, continuing a tradition of excellence.
Welcome back. It is Election Watch. Your boy JC here with you here, and we want to say good afternoon to all. Good evening to all our listeners across the various platforms. Classic 105.5, 105.9. Those of you that's on GBN Television, Facebook, YouTube, we say thanks for being part of the conversation. We took the break. We did talk about, we're discussing the issue of treating, but we want to envelope and allow all of this to make sense to us. In case you're just joining us, we previously, for the first hour, we had the leader of the Power, Andrea Rape, but she has other engagements in which she has to attend. With me still, though, is ASP Douglas. ASP, I want us to look at the behavior of the electorate, the populace on the day, as it relates to furnishing persons with loudspeaker, buntings, insignias, and all these sort of things. What does the law say about that? Is it okay that I show up at a polling station with a T-shirt representing the dear late Sir Father of Independence? It has nothing to do with election. What say you? Or am I just being naive?
Actually, those things are restricted on polling days. Section 85 of the Act says in essence that no person shall furnish or supply any loudspeaker, bunting, ensign, standard, set of colors, or any other flag to any person with intent that it shall be carried, worn, or used on a motor car, truck, other vehicles, or otherwise in public as political propaganda on polling day, and no person shall with any such intent carry, wear, or use on motor cars, trucks, other vehicles, or otherwise in public any such loudspeaker, bunting, ensign, banner, standard or set of colors, or any other flag on polling day. So those things are actually restricted on polling day. Subsection 2 says no person shall furnish or supply any flag, ribbon, label, or like favor to or for any person with intent that it should be worn or used by any person in public within any constituency on polling day as a party badge to distinguish the wearer as the supporter of any candidate or of the political or other opinions entertained or supposed to be entertained by such candidate. And no person shall use or wear any flag, ribbon, label, or other favor as such badge in public within any constituency on polling day. So the person giving those things for that purpose and the person using them for that purpose are both guilty of an offense. Subsection 3, though, says nothing contained in subsection 1 or 2 shall be deemed to extend to the furnishing or supplying of any banner bearing only the name of any candidate or only such name preceded by the words vote for, or of any rosette or of any favor bearing the symbol allotted to any candidate or to the use of any such banner on any vehicle. So the exception is that you can carry on your vehicle, and if we take the law here strictly, it only makes the exception in relation to vehicles. So carrying of the banners, etc., otherwise, the exception here doesn't cover them. So you can carry a banner saying, vote for Joseph Cadore.
Right.
And nothing more on it. That's the extent of the exception.
Right.
Or you can carry something showing the symbol of a candidate with nothing more. So I would put it this way, the text that most of those banners and so on come with would not be allowed on polling day.
And is there a distance, any perimeter violation in terms of 100 yards, 100 meters as to how? And I'm taking it into context because all over, Dave, we have party material that's plastered all over the place. We've gotten into the culture now, I see, as though we've become, it's part of our artistic agenda, where we start painting roundabouts and all those sort of things. Is there any, does the law speak to that though, SP?
The paintings and so forth?
Yes, roundabouts
It's a
and those
matter
different
that
things.
the painting of the street is a matter that I would need to research, because I recall reading some time ago that painting of the streets is unlawful. But it's been a while, and I cannot say for certain that it still exists. But the section here refers to giving of those things and using of those things on polling days themselves.
On polling days. Thanks, ASP.
And
Dave?
it's any part of the country. It's not within any specific distance of a polling station.
There's a lot we have to get. I have to rearrange my mind. We talk about treating, and we're going to show the video, because certainly it is some may see it as nothing, but if the Constitution speaks against it, then how then can we just openly violate the Constitution, the representation, of the People's Act, which is enshrined and part of. But that culture that we see, where the only thing we don't paint is four-legged animals. Some may dress them though, but we paint roundabouts. I'm seeing the roundabouts has almost become the newest addition to that display of party preference.
Well, Joe, I think you've mentioned the word party preference, because if you search the Grenada Constitution, you would not find any reference to a political party. There's none. What the Constitution speaks to is a representative for your constituency. There are no political parties. So as a Grenadian citizen, as a Commonwealth citizen, we get to choose our representatives in the parliament of the country that are going to make laws for the good governance and order and peace of Grenada. And that is what we do on election day. We don't choose the government. The government is chosen by amongst the people that we represent. And the person who has the most respect from the 15 or so becomes the prime minister. So we don't choose a prime minister. So a lot of the rhetoric that you hear that vote for as a prime minister, that is not what you're actually doing. What you're doing, or what you're supposed to be doing, is that you're supposed to ensure that your constituency is being represented, and the representative that you have is a reflection of the wishes, of the intent of the members of the constituency.
Or maybe I can argue that the RPA is probably a little bit archaic, outdated, has outlived its usefulness, and needs to be reconsidered?
A lot of, we had two chances to do so. There were two referenda, one in 2016, one in 2018, and they both proposed changes to what we considered. One wanted to introduce term limits, etc. And the people decided that they would leave it as is.
But does it point, though, to a bigger problem? We hinted to it earlier on. Lack of education. If you are spiritually minded people, the Bible says that my people perish because of lack of knowledge. We do say and make decisions not understanding, because sometimes we really don't know, and it happens that our leaders, some may argue, choose to not educate us for the purpose of keeping us in the dark.
Yeah. Because the introduction of partisan politics, the party, it stifles the channel between the constituency and the representative. So, because you have the party in the middle.
Right.
When your representative goes to parliament and he makes a decision, what is his decision? In whose interest is his decision? Is it in the party's interest, or is it in the interest of the people that he's supposed to represent? Because when we get up and everybody says, the ayes have it, yeah, and that's it, whose interest? Because the party's interest may not necessarily be what the constituency's interest is. The constituency might want the beach to remain as is. The party wants to build a hotel on the beach. So whose interest?
Will local government solve that? Or would the whole composition of local government just add another dimension to it?
And local government again brings the process closer to the people and makes them more involved in the decisions that would affect them. But the Constitution has provided local government for Carriacou and Petit Martinique since we became independent. And our leaders have, for the entire period, not been able to institute local government in Carriacou.
Wantonly, or is it because we haven't gotten to the time and space for that yet?
And we have to seriously question that, because what local government does is that it takes power away from the minister of government, and it puts the power in the hands of the people. The people make the decision.
Well, I can easily see why those that have invested with power would not want that to happen.
They don't want it to happen. So, you know, there was a lot of talk during the referendum about Carriacou and Petit Martinique for inclusion, me putting them on the passport. But they already have more than that. They can determine their destiny themselves, make their own decisions, because they have local government.
Quite interesting. I have to get back to ASP in a bit, but before we do that though, Master Control, that clip that we spoke of, technical team, if you can run it for me, and then we will see if we can wrap our minds around it.
Against the Dominican Labour Party on Tuesday sends a message that no one is above the law. The Caribbean Court of Justice ruled in favor of Antoine Defoe, Mervyn John Baptiste and Edincourt Saint-Val. The matter involved an appeal filed by the Prime Minister and other DLP candidates from the 2014 general election.
The case concerns a complaint of treating, which was filed by Mr. Defoe, Saint-Val and John Baptiste, where they stated in their complaint that the Prime Minister and the other the other candidates were guilty of treating during the 2014 elections when they provided free concerts to electors just before the election. As you know, or as most persons would know, it is a criminal offense to provide food, drinks, and entertainment and other things of a similar nature to persons for the purpose of corruptly influencing them to vote. So these complaints were filed in 2015 before the magistrate court. Rather than going to court to answer the case, the DLP candidates chose to file a judicial review to challenge the decision of the magistrate to summon them to court. They filed this judicial review application. It was heard by Justice Stevenson, and she essentially held that the magistrate did not have the jurisdiction to summon these DLP candidates to court. We were unsatisfied with the decision of the trial judge because we believe that everyone is equal before the court, and that the laws, the criminal, whether it is criminal offenses or whatever law it is, the laws of Dominica apply to each and every person equally.
Shillingford's team subsequently appealed successfully to the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal.
It was a majority decision delivered 2-1. The DLP candidates were not satisfied with the Court of Appeal decision, and so they appealed to the Caribbean Court of Justice. And yesterday, the Caribbean Court of Justice delivered a unanimous decision dismissing the appeal and essentially holding that there are not two classes of citizens in Dominica, that everyone is liable to prosecution if it is that there's a complaint that that person breached the laws of Dominica. The Caribbean Court of Justice ordered that $25,000 be paid in cost to the respondents, since the respondents were successful.
The CCJ has ordered that the Chief Magistrate assign the case file to a magistrate to hear and determine the complaint.
This means that, according to the judgment of the CCJ, the Prime Minister and the other candidates must attend court to answer their case. And I believe that it's only fair, because very often in Dominica, we see members of the opposition, we see Mr. Linton, Mr. Hector John, and several of their supporters being dragged before the court. Some of them even being arrested brutally and being kept in custody for several hours, sometimes for days. So we live in a country where the police never hesitates to charge persons who are seen as opposition party supporters with criminal offenses, and the court always summon them to court, and we have a situation where an entire senior counsel and other senior lawyers are being paid by Dominica in order to come to prosecute Mr. Linton. We have Israel Khan, who's a Trinidadian senior counsel. So we have a country that spends a lot of money, a lot of time and resources on prosecuting persons who do not support the government. If it is that whether elected or not, DLP candidates are accused of having committed a criminal offense, they must, in a country that respects the rule of law, attend court and answer to the case.
Treating occurs when an election candidate or their agents offer material incentives for people to vote for them or to abstain from voting. The consequences could include a fine, prison time, or both.
Within another Commonwealth territory, within the Caribbean, Dominica, in law there's something called precedents. Dave, put this in context for me.
Important for us as Grenadians, and she said it, no one is above the law. And that is what the CCJ ruled. I guess the ASP is used to ordinary citizens being arrested for all sorts of offenses, and you're taken before the magistrate, and the magistrate will determine what your sentence is, whether it's a custodial one, whether it's one where you're in prison, whatever the sentencing is determined by the magistrate. And what this judgment is saying is that for violations of treating, it is you go before the magistrate. Whoever the perpetrators are, they have to go before the magistrate as the ordinary citizen, because there is no protection once you are.
Where do you want it though? Let's create a timelines for us. This case goes back to 2014 elections, went to court 2015. Some might be saying in 2022, that's long gone and forgotten.
Well, the precedents, and you said it, precedents has now been set for an issue that has largely been ignored for a number of years. The Dominican public, they were brave enough to take the issue head on and take it to court. And the judgment in the court says that the case has to be heard. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. And it has gone to the highest level of the court. And there's a little difference in that Dominica, as a republic,
yes,
right, And the highest court is the CCJ. The highest appellant court is the CCJ. In our case, that would be the Privy Council.
Right.
But the ruling is there, and it's a judgment.
Quite interesting, quite interesting.
And interestingly, if you go through the Representation of the People's Act, it's a serious judgment because the penalty, 2 years imprisonment, it's a really serious one. And it signals for us the importance that is placed on this whole concept of treating, bribery, and using undue influence with respect to the electoral process and the influencing of a person as to how they would cast their ballot.
ASP, we've talked about treating, let's focus on bribery. We keep hearing this conversation about persons receiving money in T-shirts. And I've kept saying, wow, I must be some unlucky soul. I must be an unlucky soul. I mean, how come nobody ever throws one in my direction? I play some cricket back in my times. I can catch. Okay. Why not? Well, let's talk about bribery, ASP, as it relates to what the law dictates and how it treats with it. And if we can, I also want us to talk about, I remember when we last spoke, you made mention of the behavior, not just on the day, but as a build-up to it in public gatherings. So, for example, if I go to a rally this weekend, and I may not necessarily be part of the assembled group, how I'm expected to behave, what I'm not allowed to say, comments I'm not allowed to make. Can I just run across the field with a cape and a big hoodie, drenched in some of my favorite color, animated colors, and say, vote JC, vote JC. I'm the man for the day. Am I allowed to do that?
No, you would not be allowed to do that, Joe. That would amount to an interruption of the persons, the organizers of that meeting, the purpose for hosting that meeting. It would interrupt that purpose. So that would amount to an offense. It is not allowed. But if I'm to just give, as we say, my 2 pence on the judgment,
okay,
it is a very significant judgment in the sense that it makes it very clear, as was previously said, that no one is above the law, and any person who is accused of breaching the law can be brought to court. But we have not yet had a decision on the specific issue of the treating. And I anxiously look forward to a decision of the court in relation to that specific issue. And probably by the next time we have such a discussion, we might be able to discuss the decision of the court, specifically in relation to the treating.
And I guess you would agree it speaks to us maturing as a society and knowing and understanding what is enshrined in the RPA?
Yes, of course. It's significant.
Joe,
another thing I wish to raise, though, I heard you mention time running out. And there are a few bits and pieces of don'ts that I think are very significant now more than ever because of our advancement in terms of technology and so forth. And at some point before we close, I would like to raise them. Some matters that were included in the 2018 amendment to the Representation of the People Act.
Okay. You could probably share some of them while we're here.
All right. So Section 96 of the Act refers to or speaks to offenses in relation to ballot papers. So those are specific to ballot papers. And it says basically that it's an offense for any person to forge or counterfeit or fraudulently deface or destroy any ballot paper. That's an offense. Any person without due authority supplies a ballot paper to any person. Any person who fraudulently puts into any ballot box any paper other than the ballot paper which he or she is authorized by the law to put in. Any person without due authority destroys takes, opens, or otherwise interferes with any ballot box or packet of ballot paper then in use for the purpose of any election, any person not being duly registered as an elector who votes at an election, all those are offenses. The amendment, however, in 2018, created a new subsection G, and it says, any person who uses a cellular phone, digital camera, or any other electronic device to record, photograph, or otherwise capture and publish the image of a marked ballot paper on polling day. So this one falls in line with, as I said, the technology of the day. You are not allowed, no one is allowed to capture the image of a marked ballot paper. So you make your X, and then you take a picture of it or you video it, and you share it. That's an offense. In addition, a new section was created, 96A, which says, subject to subsection 2, no person shall have in his or her possession any electronic device upon entering a polling booth to cast his or her ballot on polling day. So we are restricted from going into that booth with any electronic device. But the law makes provision for how we handle this, because most persons would go to the polling station with their device. It says in subsection 2 that a person who has an electronic device in his or her possession shall, upon entering the polling station on polling day, hand over the electronic device to the returning officer or his or her designate. So while you're not restricted from going to the polling station with your device, when you get inside, you must hand it over to that officer or any other person that that officer designates to receive it. Subsection 3 says, after the person has cast his or her ballot, the returning officer or his or her designate shall return the electronic device to the person. So I know that we have a lot of young people that may be excited about how or where they cast their votes, and may wish to share that with persons for whatever reason. So the law makes it very clear that it is an offense to do so. And I really wanted us to get that in before we close tonight.
Okay, excellent, excellent. We're keeping our eyes on the clock. It is 29 minutes, 30 minutes on, yes, 29 minutes gone past the hour in the evening time. Dave, we looked at that judgment from coming out of Dominica by the CCJ, and we did establish the fact that, given the fact that they're a republic, the CCJ being that final judgment rendered by the CCJ. We talk about precedents. There seems to be a growing culture that's not just unique to Grenada, but you get a sense, looking at Dominica, that we're not alone, where our leaders, it's as though being elected into office gives them an open license to do what they want, how they want, in transgression of the IPA and by default the Constitution. And some have argued that all of this, you see, this partisan politics, literally points in one direction, a hijacking of our democracy. And some have argued it's a slippery slope. If we don't deal with it now, too late might be the cry.
As Commonwealth citizens, we have to be very aware of our history. Our forefathers were the sons and daughters of slaves, you know. And the democracy that we have now, we should guard zealously because of that. Simply because there was a time when we were treated less than human, and it was okay, it was legal to do so. There was a time when the process that we are now preparing for, to vote, we had no say. You know, we were fed at whatever time the master thought we should be fed, you know, and all of those things. We did not have a say. So we have now come to the time where we have the ability to chart our own destiny. What independence should have brought to us was sovereignty. That as a nation, we can decide our destiny, our directions. That is something that we have to guard zealously. I think that it is now being challenged more so than at any period in our history. And the population as a people, we have to understand that there are times in our lives when we have to put partisan politics aside and sit as adults and make adult decisions for the betterment of our children. Because, I mean, we are here only to pass this thing on to the children. So we have to guard our democracy. That is the duty of every Grenadian citizen. And there are many takers for that democracy, you know. We hear every day about passports being sold. So we're selling our passports, we're selling our identity. But the projects that are being delivered, we don't own nothing. We own no part of it.
Right.
So what is the justification? What is there for us? The investor that is coming, he is not coming with money. He is selling our passport to make an investment, but we have no share in it. And these investments are taking up our prime spaces.
The issue of the partisan politics that has become part of the political landscape, is it that over years, we just found we've become victims of it unassumingly, or is it something that has been carefully and well articulated by the unseen hands?
We have been cultured into this. It has been a process. It has been a slow process that rights are removed daily, slowly.
Right.
Small rights. Nobody, everybody says, oh, well, it's okay. It's all right. But as a society, we have to accept, we have to understand that the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, once authorities infringe on those rights, you never get them back. You never get them back. And with every infringement, you lose authority, you lose the power that is supposed to be, that's supposed to reside with the people. That power is lost. So whereas the people is supposed to be the final authority, if we have to change our constitution, if we have to change the rules that govern the relationship between the people and those that we hire to manage our affairs, we are the ones to change it. We are the ones to make the rules. So we have to understand that we are in charge. We are the ones that are in charge. And until we get to that point, we will continue to repeat that cycle and repeat that cycle and mortgage the future of our children, because our children will have to pay for our mistakes.
And I guess many would make the argument that you cannot change that which you don't understand.
And you can't change what you don't understand.
Because even if you try to engage in the exercise to change, how do you change for betterment when you have no appreciation for that which is contained? You literally just be spinning top in mud.
And Joe, it goes to the fact that as Grenadians, we don't appreciate what we have. And the first thing that you have to do, you must value what is yours. If you don't, then you let it go for whatever comes.
Has that also affected, and I probably would ask ASP, because I know there's certain things I know he is not able to get directly involved in, and I totally would understand it, ASP. But we looked at not being able to appreciate that which we have, our culture, and we adopt everything. For instance, we've gotten into the culture of treating as it is, but everybody does it. But yet we seem to always invite an outsider Whereas you have loads of artists locally that you've given the title of ambassador, they have this ambassadorial role, and yet we invite the foreigners, and then you ask ourselves the question, why is it our young people seem to gravitate to everything that which isn't quote unquote a true representation of who we are as a people?
And you know, that is an important reference, because it is our elections. We are electing the people that we want to manage our affairs. And the people that we are electing are showing us that they would disregard the talent that we have locally in preference for something that is foreign. So how could that be what we as a people are thinking about? Even before they are elected, they're doing it. So what do we expect afterwards?
They showed us an open hand, but when they close it, we then try to ask them to show us again, when they already told us exactly.
They already told us what is going to happen.
Quite interesting.
And I absolutely, this whole concept of bringing in shows, you know, it's treated. It's a treat. That is exactly what was brought to court in Dominican case.
Why did they make the argument, well, it's, and somebody actually, they made an argument today in discussing this and preparing. They say, well, they could always argue, well, it's a youth arm. It's not really us. It's, you know, one of the auxiliary bodies within the organization that's doing it, and it's just for the purpose of entertainment.
Well, the laws refer to those who are perpetuating and those who are receiving. Those who are doing the act and those who are receiving the act. They are both guilty of the act treated. So we have to treat this thing seriously, with the seriousness that it deserves, understanding what it is it's trying to protect. Because the independence of your vote, the secrecy of your vote, that is yours. It is yours and yours alone. And it brings me to one of the issues that we're trying to address now. John Rollo is a visually impaired person, and he has been for years trying to get attention of the supervisor of elections with respect to the secrecy of his vote, as enshrined in the Constitution of Grenada. It's an entrenched provision.
Yet again, another glaring example of how far we're willing to transgress and ignore that which is should be, and the supervisor of election, his job should be to reflect that which the Constitution.
The Constitution, yeah. So,
wow.
There's no ambiguity. There's no argument. The right belongs to Mr. Rollo, and it is the supervisor's duty to deliver. And it's just not John Rollo, but there are almost 8,000, 9,000 visually impaired people. A lot of them are elderly. So why has this been allowed to get to this stage, 10 days, 20, how many days before an election? We are on the brink of an election, right? That is supposed to be peaceful and all of that. But the rights and enshrined in the Constitution of the electorate are being infringed on, and it's being infringed upon by the very entity that is set up to protect those rights.
So you're supposed to be the keeper of the gate, but those very individuals are the ones transgressing. We hold that thought there. I'm coming back to you, ASP. One of the things I want us to talk about is the hours at the polling station. What are the legal hours? Because I keep saying, for me, I make it a priority on election day. The first thing I do, that's my first order of business. I get up bright and early, because I don't want any officer to tell me, JC boy, my clock said 2 minutes past, and I'm telling you, I program my watch that is 10 minutes, and this is what it is. Let's talk about the hours at the polls. What are the legal hours, so at least the general public can have an appreciation. ASP.
Certainly. Section 50 of the Representation of the People Act clearly states that the taking of the poll at each polling station shall be between 6 o'clock in the forenoon and 5 o'clock in the afternoon of the same day. So it's 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. on polling day. Those are the legal polling hours. And it is important that persons understand that you must get there before 5 p.m. You can get there before 6 a.m., that's fine. Then you'll be required to wait until 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. We should not go arguing with the presiding officer saying, well, I came early enough so that I can vote and go back to work. They're not allowed to start the process until 6 a.m. They can make necessary preparations, but the process of actual voting can only begin at 6 a.m. And any person who arrives at the polling station after 5 p.m. would not be allowed to vote because they would have missed that legal time span that is allowed for that purpose. If you're in line, if you're in line before 5 p.m.,
can the officer use his discretion, though? Well, officer, I came early, the line was long, I had to go to work, and then I had to go to the daycare to pick up my 2 children, then I had to go get Granny some medication. So because of that, and or when I'm leaving, I say, officer, I'm going to come back in an hour, but I managed to come back a little late. I mean, certainly, good conscience would prevail. The officer would he be able to say, well, or the presiding officer, sure, I understand.
Joe, I do not know what directives the presiding officers would have in relation to an issue like that. But if I'm to give you my opinion, a person who is not in the line up to 5 p.m., in my opinion, would not be allowed to vote. Because you must be there by 5 p.m. in order for you to be allowed to cast your votes. I cannot say whether or not the presiding officers may have had other directives, but that is my opinion. If you left and you return after 5 p.m., it is my opinion that you will not be allowed to vote. Because you're not allowed to join the line after 5 p.m.
You're not allowed to join the line. Dave, I mean, and I'm assuming when it comes to the position taken by the presiding officers, there should be no ambiguity to it. Mm-hmm. I would assume that it should be straightforward. A 100 meter, I can see the path ahead of me, and it doesn't allow for flexibility of judgment. What's your Dave?
The thing is, there can always be an issue where the law cannot be strictly applied. You may always find a situation like that, and it is those kinds of circumstances that discussions are to be held among those persons involved in that process, so that everyone understands the same thing.
Right.
So, for example, I indicated at some point before that I have not seen the law speak on the issue of a person without hands. It must be someplace, but I have not seen it. The law specifies which finger must be used to be dipped in the electoral ink and so forth. But even if I have not seen it, the presiding officers must have had directives on what to do in circumstances like that.
Tell us what the law dictates, though, just for the purpose of educating the general public.
Are you referring to the inking of the fingers?
The inking of the fingers.
Right. In a sense, it says that, first of all, the presiding officer must satisfy him or herself that that person does not have any substance on their finger. The appropriate digit is what the law refers to it as. Basically, what it is your right forefinger, if you have normal hands with a thumb and 4 fingers. So it would be your right forefinger. If you do not have that right forefinger, if it is missing, then it will be the next finger in line on that same hand. If you do not have any fingers on that hand, but you have a thumb, then the thumb will become that appropriate digit.
Right.
Right? If you're missing your right hand, or you don't have any digits on your right hand, then it goes to the left, and the same applies. The left forefinger If that finger is missing, then it goes to the next finger in line. No fingers, then it's the thumb. And as I indicated earlier, I have not seen the law speak on the issue of a person with no hands. So I cannot say what the position would be in relation to that. So the presiding officer must satisfy him or herself that there is no substance on that, whichever finger is determined to be the appropriate digit.
Right.
That there is no substance on it which would prevent the electoral ink from, as we would say, sticking to your finger.
Right.
Right? So some persons may try to use things like grease and all these other things to prevent it from staying on their finger. And the presiding officer has to ensure that that doesn't exist before they allow that person to dip that finger in that electoral ink.
So I'm assuming they also have the right to examine your digits.
Yes, the presiding officer has the authority to do that. And if you fail to comply, the presiding officer has the authority also to have you removed from, because the presiding officer is the person in charge of that polling station. And any lawful direction given by that person, that presiding officer, must be followed, or that person can be removed. In some circumstances, be arrested on the directive of the presiding officer.
Quite interesting. But Dave, it's interesting though, Dave, that you have the presiding officer who's enshrined with all of these, the power that's vested in him. You have the supervisor of elections given that much power. But yet you don't see that aggressive, what I would say is that aggressive appetite to educate the general public on that which is contained and how they should behave. I mean, you're thinking that now, the same way you're seeing that aggressive agenda by the political organized parties to get their message outside, that the electoral office should, in similar fashion, be having these public engagements, schools, different platforms to let the people know this is the exercise and the importance of it.
Well, I think that even goes beyond just the electoral office. There is a lack of energy with respect to education on the Constitution. Every citizen must be aware of what a good citizen is, and that is enshrined in the Constitution. And we're supposed to produce good citizens. But if you remain unaware of the duties that you have to your fellow man, the duty that you have to your Creator, how is it going to happen? And the same is happening with the Representation of the People's Act and all the what is necessary for elections to be free and fair. And as an electorate, the office is there to serve us. The office of the supervisor is there to serve you. They are your servants. And we have to get to that place, because that is what it is. They are public servants. The Constitution requires that a public servant must head that office. And it is because it encompasses the whole concept of service. So the duty of in my view, the duty of the supervisor should be to ensure that the registration process, which he oversees, was complete. That every available citizen who wanted to register had an opportunity to, because he's our servant. I think it's an insult to the public to go to the registration and the door be closed without any notice.
And are you pointing, I just want to know before we go, are you pointing to the fact that there was that abrupt, the fact that the announcement was made the Saturday weekend, which gave most Grenadians, well, I'm not sure most, which gave persons wishing to register that limited window? You're saying that is
Well,
You complete?
what announcement was made on Saturday? And who made the announcement? And who has authority to make what announcement? Now, the Prime Minister is authorized to advise the Governor General to dissolve the Parliament of Grenada.
Right.
That's his authority.
So there's no argument over that?
There's no argument over that.
Right.
So he goes, he advises the Governor General. The Governor General has the option to take the advice or not to take the advice.
Right.
All right? After that is done, the Governor General has to engage the independent office of the Supervisor of Elections to ensure that the Supervisor of Elections is ready, that there is ballot paper, that the staff is there, that people are registered.
Is that what you're hoping should happen? Or is that what is legally, that's the process?
That is what should happen. The supervisor is responsible for all the materials to ensure that the election process takes place. So,
And showing that each and every eligible individual is
each
given
and
the opportunity.
every eligible individual is registered.
Failure to do that constitutes what?
Well, his duty is to ensure, is to oversee the registration process.
Right.
And he's registering people to vote in an election. And he has to give them that opportunity. So the Constitution allows that even after the date for the Parliament to be dissolved is announced, there is a 90-day period at the very maximum, or 21 days at the very minimum, within which you can set the date. So the Constitution allows for that to take place.
Right.
We don't think that that happened.
We don't think it happened?
Well,
or you saying it didn't
There's no
happen?
evidence that that has happened.
What evidence do you need? What would constitute the evidence, would represent the evidence?
I don't think that people are seeing people being turned away from the registration offices, the parliamentary electoral offices, on the Tuesday morning. Being registered to vote is a constitutional right, and anybody who infringes on that,
And you're saying
and
that
any action that infringes on that, should not happen.
any action that infringes on that should not happen. It's a violation of our rights, you say. ASP, I'm going to give you just a minute or two just to encapsulate, and again, remind the general public as to how, oh, by the way, who was policing the police when you were voting? Who polices the lawman when you cast your vote, ASP? You'll be policing us.
Joe, that question is synonymous with asking who will shine the light for the sun.
Well, unfortunately, the sun has his own light source. It is the sun. I am not quite sure whether the same.
The police officers are expected to behave in a manner that does not require supervision. But of course, police officers will be posted at the polling stations as normal. That is part of the process to ensure that that happens. So
Right.
even if it's police officers coming to vote, there must be officers posted at the station to ensure that control is maintained. In fact, it's not only for the police officers coming to vote, it's to maintain law and order in general, because you may have some persons who may, at some point when there is no officer coming to vote, an individual may choose to go into that polling station and create a problem. So police officers will be posted there. But in general, the police will behave in a manner that does not require supervision.
Interesting.
And in general, Grenadians would behave in a manner that elections are peaceful, orderly,
historically, yes,
and respectful. By and large, there are not many problems, and it's shaky now.
Why you say shaky though?
Well, we seem not to be able to relinquish our partisan, that partisan mentality that we have, that I belong to XYZ. So that is becoming more and more embedded in us, and that may prove difficult in the future. But by and large, we've always had peaceful elections, and I want to compliment the Grenadian people for that, and we look forward to another election in that light.
We have to go ASP, but there's one question I want to ask you. As it relates to the behavior, I know as part of the Act, the Representation of People's Act, it certainly speaks about you making reference, saying things to deliberately provoke and harass a person or to agitate them into behaving a particular way. And I know that is part of the law, but very often we see the politicians themselves, the candidates, they're the ones, they do it on the podium very often. Where do we draw the line, though? I want to ask it to you. Comment if you can, then I'm going to ask Ned to comment. Because very often, they're the ones I hear them, some of the most insane things coming off of the podium, not necessarily from the crowds. Is there any law against that?
I believe you're referring to inciting a person.
Correct.
To commit a breach. And in fact, inciting a person to commit a breach of the peace is an offense in general. It's an offense under the criminal code. Right? And any person who does that, just like the court ruled that any member of any citizen of the country can be brought to court for treating.
Right.
Similar thing applies to this type of offense. Any person who incites another person to commit a breach of the peace is guilty of an offense and can be taken to court and prosecuted for it.
Quite interesting. I'm looking forward to the day when we remind all of our prospective politicians, those who vying for office, that is in fact, they can be held accountable to that. Ned, final word from you?
Not just that they can be held accountable, but they are in fact equal to every other citizen in this regard, and that is important for us. As a people, our vote is what defines that equality that we speak about in democracy. Each and every one of us has one vote, and we're going to total those votes, and the majority will make the decision, and that is the decision. Those are the rules that we're going to live by, that's going to govern the relationship between ourselves.
Well, folks, this is where we rest the conversation for this evening. I want to say thanks to my guests from the IWGPF, ASP Douglas. We say thanks also to the leader of the Power Party. She was with us. She engages for the first hour, Andrea Rape. And thanks to Dave Ned, a representative from the Independent Caucus for Constitutional Reform. I want to remind us Grenadians that the campaign is just for a season. Our rights of who we are as a people, it remains with us for a lifetime. Come after the 23rd of June, we would all still be Grenadians. We might be different walks of life, different fields. We may look, feel, do things differently, but we would all remain Grenadians. Let us understand that which is we are expected to do come the 23rd of June. It's your civic responsibility, and I would encourage you, not by any stretch of the imagination, that you should slight that responsibility. We are being tasked with the responsibility of asking ourselves, whom should it be that should rule, not over us, but we put as stewards of our business for the next 5 years. Something to think about as we continue to march towards Election Day, June the 23rd. From all of us here at the GBN, we say thanks to our listeners, all of our viewers. Continue doing that which you do. So long, everybody. Have a great night. JC loves you. And again, thanks to you, Dave, and thanks to you, ASP Douglas. Good night, Grenada.
Pleasure, Joe. Thanks to GBN, and thanks to the listening public. ASP.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.